guys, this is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we're going to be looking at the Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition GUILE from Play Arts Kai or Square Enix. This is a pretty cool figure. I have to say though, it seems like a step backwards after looking at Ibuki last week. They made some nice improvements on Ibuki that are not here on GUILE. In fact, there are a couple things that I don't really care about on GUILE, so stay tuned to find out what those are. Alright, so first off, he stands just about, depending on how you pose him, of course, give or take, just about 9 1/4 inches tall. So he's in pretty good scale with everybody else. Nothing to really complain about there. He's got some cool accessories. As you can see, he has 2 fist hands, one for each side, one normal angry face. We have 2 open-ish hands that I don't really understand why they gave us these. These are not hands that are really particularly iconic for GUILE. I know why. I guess technically I know why they gave them to us, what they're based on, but they just don't seem to be the best choices. Maybe some standard open hands or a comb like from Soda would have been good, but we do have these. So I don't know. If you want to use these, go for it. I will not be using them. They just look kind of goofy. We also have the Sonic Boom accessory, which we only got 1 of. I also know why they did that, although I would have preferred having 2. If you see, it's got some nice translucent plastic, yellow to blue to purple, but on the outside it's got this silver paint that, well, kind of like a pearly white paint that is really probably overdone, and it kills the color for most of it. It does snap into his fist hand, or onto, I should say. It snaps on pretty well. It's a little tricky to get the hand where you need it to go. At least it was the first time for me. Maybe it'll go easier this time. Maybe it won't. So as you can see, it is a little tricky to get the hand in there. Well, I'm not going to bother doing it since it's going to take up too much time, but there are little peglet type things in there that will hold the hand in place, and it snaps on pretty deep and onto the hand, so he holds it no problem. But there is one problem with that, and we'll get to that later on in the articulation section. And lastly, we have his constipated face, which is okay. I don't think I'll be using this. He just looks a little bit whiny more than yelling, but it's okay. It's not horrible. I just think the standard head looks much better. And how you're going to change those out is not the best. You can see a seam right here. That's because the whole front of the head just pops off. And even though the hair is spiked hair and it should hide the seam pretty well, they didn't do a really good job because the paints don't line up perfectly. It's a little better on this side, but it's still just kind of a clumsy connection. I think it would have been better if they did like figure arts and split the hair from the face and just changed out the face. But what are you going to do? So let's look at the figure's paint. He does have a lot of tonage going on for the skin, so that's not bad. Some spots are darker than others, so that's not the best though. If you look at his shoulder compared to his chest, the chest is a lot darker, looks like sunburn kind of, and then the shoulder's not quite as dark. It's really not too big of a deal though. I'm not going to complain about it. It's just something. It might be worse on some figures than others, so keep an eye out for that. The paint on the pants, the camo pants, the green parts are really nice. There's a lot of shading. They look really good, but the camo itself is super faint. There's only brown. There's no other colors, which might be accurate for Street Fighter 4. I don't remember, but being that they're supposed to be camo, and based at least on Street Fighter 2, he had a lot more colors than just brown and a lot more coloring than just the few spots that they have on here. So that's a little bit of a letdown. The boots have some nice shading on them, and the eyelets or whatever those are called, somebody told me but I don't remember, are painted for the laces, so that looks good. The belt is painted okay. There is some smudging going on for the buckle, so that's not ideal. And there's just little areas like right there on his tank top that are kind of smudged also. So the paint on this guy isn't the best. And also, this might be a common issue. Wherever the torso was lined up to the crotch piece, there's paint rub there. So they probably put it together too early. So that's kind of a problem for me as well as far as the paint goes. The shoulders are done well though. The tattoos look pretty good. Can't really complain about that. Okay, so the paint looks okay. It's not great, but it'll probably do. The face paint, I guess, is pretty good. The eyes look really good. So, I'm happy with that. They always do such a good job with the eyes. I think you can actually see the dot matrix a little bit in there since I'm zoomed in so close. You can't tell those dots are there with the naked eye, so don't worry about that, but that just goes to show the amount of detail in there. Okay, so the sculpt is pretty good. There are a few problems which really line up with articulation, so we'll worry about that there. Just know that the sculpt is fine. All the clothes wrinkles for the abs and the chest and the pants, everything looks really, really nice. So sculpt is good, no complaints there at all. Looks great. As far as articulation goes now, this is where we start to run into some problems. Most notably, well not most notably, but to start off, you can see there's a huge gap for the ball peg for the head, and that's easier to see with the head off, of course. But even with the head on, there's a huge gap between the head and the neck, which allows for better articulation, and it doesn't look bad depending on how you look at it, but it can get pretty ugly. The neck is articulated individually, but it is also not very usable. Pull the head all the way back so you can see that there's a big gap there, but also so you can see that the neck, even though it does articulate, it's kind of bulky and doesn't spin very well inside that cavity. So that could have been done a little bit better. You're just going to get a little bit out of it. It's really not too bad. One thing I forgot to mention real quick is that the necklace really should have been a separate piece like it was on Soda's figures. I mean, it looks good. They did a good job with the sculpt, good enough, I guess, with the paint, but it definitely would have looked better if it was a separate piece rather than sculpted on. So that's a bit of a bummer for me. As far as the shoulders go, we have the standard butterfly, which works really well, except for the fact that it just popped out, so I'm going to have to push that back in. That's not good. It shouldn't be popping out that easily. But it does help me to show off the articulation. So that's how the butterfly works. It just pegs in and then it swivels on that peg. I'm kind of bummed out that it popped out so easily. Huh. It looks like it's broken, but there's no part in there. Maybe there is. I'm going to have to get a replacement. Bummer. Okay, so anyway. So you have the butterfly joint, and then you have the peg joint that holds the bicep or the shoulder into that joint, which sticks out a whole lot. It only does that so that it can accommodate for the shoulder swiveling into that socket, which is kind of ugly because if you put his arms down, there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap in the joint. It just doesn't look good at all. So I don't care for that too much. Then we have the bicep swivel, which isn't really the best because of the way it's sculpted, the way it comes up so high over here. When you rotate it, it doesn't work very well. You have to really force it, and it kind of separates just a little bit, so that's not very good. Then you have the single hinged ball hinge for the elbow. It swivels at the bicep and at the forearm and is ratcheted. That's okay. Same kind of joint for the wrist, but it's really ugly on the wrist because this is just cut off flat here. They didn't sculpt it to kind of look seamless at all, so it works okay for the hand, but for the wrist or for the forearm not so much. And then the paint on the arms really make it look different from the plastic on the joint, so that's kind of a bummer as well. We'll set that back in place for now. As I mentioned earlier, there's a problem with the sonic boom accessory in that even though it snaps on the hand just fine, the way the shoulder is designed, you can't get the arm back to look as good as you would want it to look while he's holding the sonic boom or while he's using it. So once you snap it on, the way it's curved, it just doesn't give you a good angle to have him hold it that looks really natural. It's not going to be probably as good as it could have been. It's just going to be passable. So the sonic boom, even though it looks cool kind of, it's more of a dud than it is a nice accessory. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to play around with it a little bit and see if I can get some good posing done, but so far I haven't had too much luck. It looks kind of awkward more often than not. The torso articulation is fine. You have tons of range of motion in it, but it's got a huge gap, as you can see, right into the peg holder and everything like that. So it's a double peg, and I mean, it looks okay at most angles, but be careful because you will get a big gap in some positions, and it is pretty loose. It's not ideal. It can't hold its own weight at all, not even close. So even up at the head, any little touch and it'll fall down. So that's not really good. The lower torso is a standard ball peg like we've seen on every other Play Arts figure, so that's good. Aside from the paint rub, you have all the articulation you want there. You have the floating crotch piece, which is soft plastic, so it won't get in the way of any articulation, so that's fine by me. Ratcheted to the side for the hips and to the front, that's good. And then you have the swivel for the ball peg as well. Double jointed knees, which are not nearly as good as Ibuki's. I was hoping they would be the same design, but they look okay. They're better than most have been from Play Arts, so I'm not going to really complain about them, but it would have been nice to have the same style joint as Ibuki because hers looked great. And these just look passable. They're not really ideal, I don't think. Then for the boot, it looks like it should swivel at the top of the boot, but neither of mine will move, and I don't want to break it, so I'm leaving those there. Then we have the same type of joint in the ankle as we have in the wrist and the elbow, so it swivels at the top of the boot, at the bottom of the boot, and is ratcheted. The peg for the ball, instead of going straight down, it goes at an angle to allow for the foot to have an ankle rocker. And if you rotate the hinge, you can have an even better ankle rocker. So that covers all of the ankle articulation. Then they also gave us this stupid cut joint, which I don't like, and they didn't give in a couple of the more recent figures. So I was hoping they'd leave it out of this guy too, but I guess they forgot to fix that problem. So it seems kind of like Guile is a step backwards, both in quality and in production design. So I'm not really extremely pleased with this figure. It'll do. I'm not gonna say you shouldn't buy it. Just don't expect it to be as good as some of the past Play Arts figures, more recent past Play Arts figures. So there's the figure itself. We also get a stand that comes with him inside the package. It looks just like this. So it's got an adjustable upright piece, an adjustable claw piece right there, and a nice base. And that just comes behind the blister that the figure is on this kind of insert piece, which you have to cut it open or tear it open to get the thing out. Hopefully you can see this. I don't know, it's so light. Is it even focusing? I don't know. Hopefully you can see it. But you have to cut this out of here, so it's going to look pretty ugly because the blister is clear. So if you're keeping the packaging, you may want to keep this intact or be super careful when you're taking it out. But that's up to you. It's probably not too big a deal. So there it is, guys. There's the Play Arts Kai Guile. Definitely kind of a disappointment, even though it's probably still worth getting. Just don't expect to be too happy with it once you get it. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more custom figures, more figure reviews, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.